Hi everyone, Stephen Frank. I'm here in a basement talking about the true cost of taxation. Chapter 8 is basically about the economic well-being that we have when taxes are figured into the equation. On one hand, we have some people that they'll say that taxes are a good thing because of the revenue that's created from taxation goes to government policies and government projects that provide for its education, public service, and really a lot of things that we need in our daily lives to make things life a lot easier for us. On the other side, though, we also have people that say taxation is a very negative thing because it limits our consumer and producer surplus, limits the total surplus of the economy, and that the deadweight loss always outweighs what the actual tax revenue is. So today we're actually going to talk about Chapter 8, the true cost of taxation. If you want to go back, remember back to chapters 1, 6, and 7, we talked about taxes initially. One of the first things to remember is, in Chapter 1, we talk about that the government can sometimes actually make a market better. It can make it more efficient, it can make it more equal. On the flip side, though, governments can also make an economy less efficient by providing producers and consumers disincentives to do certain things that they normally would in a completely free market situation. Going back to Chapter 6 and 7, we kind of talk about how taxes impact both buyers and sellers. That even when the government enacts a tax upon buyers, the sellers are also bearing a portion of that burden, with the burden being determined by the elasticity of supply and demand. Whatever's more elastic is probably going to be the one where the burden falls to. So with all that in mind, let's look at some supply-demand curves here. Right here, we have a standard supply-demand curve, and we'll say this is in the market of tube size. Hopefully the mirror does not break. Right here is our quantity, right there is our initial price. What ends up happening is when the government enacts a tax, the price shifts up, the quantity shifts down, and right here we have our tax revenue. What you can see is initially our producer surplus is here and our consumer surplus is up there. Now, with the tax revenue, this is going to the government. Now the question kind of now is, if taxes don't benefit consumers or producers, or it has a negative effect on both, why do we have tax policies? And the answer is actually pretty simple, that a lot of this tax revenue does provide benefits that we need. As I said before, education, police, roads, military, the tax revenue does have an impact. The question is, though, are taxes too high? And a lot of that is determined by this little area right here, the deadweight loss, where this area is producer and consumer surplus that's gone. The tax itself is basically taking this part out of the economy. And the big fear economists have is that when you raise taxes and you continually make taxes larger and larger, that this area, the deadweight loss, grows exponentially. And when this area is lost, we can't regain it. It's part of the surplus that's no longer in the economy. One of the founders of modern economic thought is Adam Smith. And one of the big things Adam Smith discusses is the idea of trades. When it comes to taxations and deadweight loss and loss of total surplus, one of the best examples is just a simple trade between two partners in an economy. We have two people. One, Jeff Trinkets. The other, Kriegs. Kriegs wants to get all jacked up, wants to get ripped. So he pays Trinka $200 to personally train him. Trinkets, being the personal trainer that he is, values his services at about $180. That's his opportunity cost. The artist formerly known as Kriegs is willing to pay $220 to get all jacked up. What they end up deciding on is a trade of $200. Kriegs is willing to pay $200 to Trinkets to train him. Trinkets wins because the $200 is $20 more than what he viewed his own value at, so he has $20 consumer surplus, or producer surplus. Kriegs, on the other hand, being the consumer, he's willing to pay $220, he's only paying $200, so he has $20. You have a total of $40 of total surplus in this economy. This is without taxes. Well, Johnny Government comes in and decides, here's what we want to do. Let's put a $50 tax on all personal trainers for some reason, and what ends up happening is there's no possible situation where Trinkets and Krieger can come to agreement where both parties benefit. Either way, one side isn't going to be able to afford the other side. Either Trinkets is going to have to put his prices so high that Krieg's can't pay for it, or Krieg's just, there's no longer value to it. This trade no longer occurs because the government gets involved and puts a tax on it. So that's $40 of total surplus that's completely lost, that we can't get back. So individuals that tend to argue for more free market and less taxation point out to trade situations like this, that taxation and the deadweight loss provides individuals a disincentive to work, to make trades with each other, provides a disincentive for producers to produce and consumers to consume. Now, all that stuff we can look in the book, and specifically Chapter 8. But one of the more interesting things that Chapter 8 begins to touch on is more some macroeconomic ideas. One of the big ones is supply-side economics and the old Laffer curve. Now, one of the first things you see the curve is that when the government revenue is at, or when the government tax rate is at 0%, the government's making $0. When the government tax policy is at 100%, it's also making $0 in total revenue. The reason is because if you're taxed at 100%, there's no incentive for any individual to work anymore because everything you do is being taken. Just like if there's no taxes, clearly there's no government revenue coming in. Now, economist Arthur Laffer came up with this in the 1970s. And one of the big reasons why he did this was because during the 1970s, we went through a period of economic turmoil in this country called stagflation. That through the old economic models, demand side basically, there's no way to both deal with inflation and high employment at the same time. Demand economics just couldn't do that. Laffer, being a supply-sider, said the focus should be on supply, and that the tax rates were so high, they were somewhere around this area right here. That really to maximize government revenue, we had to shift the tax rate down. He ends up actually gaining quite a bit of say in the Reagan administration, and it's during the 1980s that you see the United States change their economic policy from more demand-side and higher taxes to lower taxes and more supply-side based theories, using the Laffer curve, using some of the works of George Gilder, Jude Renanski, Milton Friedman, and even going all the way back to Adam Smith. It's during this time that we do see considerable growth in the country. We see per capita income increase by about $4,000. We see total production increase. We see GDP increase. We see the standard of living in the United States increase. Mostly due to the fact that by lowering the taxes, there's a greater incentive for producers to produce and for consumers to consume. And the taxes that were there were relatively small, so the deadweight loss was fairly minimal. Compare that to President George H.W. Bush, who when he comes in office, does increase taxes, increasing this deadweight loss, and you do see a drop in per capita income, you see a reduction in GDP growth per year, and you see a reduction in productivity. In short, that's just kind of one example of supply-side economics, the Laffer curve, and how taxation and low tax policies can potentially help impact an economy and help the economic well-being grow. But there are examples on both sides. Again, it all depends on the deadweight loss and its size, and its relation to the total revenue, or the tax revenue, and the total surplus. If the deadweight loss is greater than the total surplus, then the economic well-being is going to go down. If the deadweight loss remains small, and the revenue taken in by the government through the tax does serve and is greater than the deadweight loss itself, the tax is probably going to be a good thing for the country. Thanks for your time. Have a great night.